From a young age, it was clear I wasn't the favored child. My name is Emma, and in our Milwaukee home, my brother Jason always took center stage, while I remained a quiet presence in the background. Jason is 4 years my senior, but the difference extended beyond age. My parents treated his minor achievements as if they were extraordinary. No matter how diligently I worked, I received at best a polite acknowledgement. I vividly recall an evening when I was 9. I presented my mom with a completed application for a weekend art class at the local community center. I had filled it out independently and attached a watercolor painting I was particularly proud of. She reviewed it, smiled gently, and placed her hand on my shoulder. "Perhaps next semester, sweetheart. I just finalized payment for Jason's advanced guitar class." I simply nodded, retrieved the form, and tucked it away in my desk drawer, never to mention it again. It was a different story with Jason. The moment his music teacher identified potential, my parents jumped into action. They secured a private vocal coach, purchased a professional microphone, and converted our living room into a makeshift home studio. His singing practice consumed hours each evening as Mom watched with pride. "Jason possesses such a beautiful voice. He's destined for success." Meanwhile, I studied in my room, struggling to concentrate amidst the noise and constant praise. When I once expressed interest in attending a summer reading camp, the response was always, "The family budget's a bit tight right now." A gentle way of saying everything was allocated to Jason. Dinners followed a predictable pattern. Jason spoke, and our parents listened intently. He shared updates about his latest musical composition, new acquaintances, and upcoming performances. I sat quietly, cutting my carrots, hoping for an opportunity to mention that I received an A in English. However, by the meal's end, I remained silent. As Jason entered high school, the disparity became even more pronounced. If a teacher commended him, Mom would immediately inform relatives and neighbors. But when my teacher texted that I was well behaved, Mom simply replied, "Thanks," and dismissed the message as if it never existed. By the age of 14, I understood that if I desired anything in life, I would have to obtain it myself. I ceased expecting, asking, and explaining. I became adept at suppressing my thoughts and smiling as if everything were fine. Once, I inquired of my dad why Jason consistently received more attention. He hesitated before saying, "Jason truly possesses talent. You're good too, but he has the kind of potential that can take him far." I turned away, concealing the tear that threatened to fall, not because his words were overly harsh, but because they validated what I had always suspected. I was never the priority within my own family. Since that conversation with my dad, I stopped seeking recognition from my family. The summer I turned 15, while Jason was preparing to commence college with a full scholarship to Emerson University and a fully furnished apartment leased in our parents' name, I quietly began searching for a part-time job. My options were limited. As a teenage girl without a driver's license, navigating a small city like Milwaukee was challenging. Fortunately, my grandparents, who owned a small antique store on the outskirts of town, offered me an opportunity. On my first day at the antique store, my grandfather gestured toward a dusty collection of old books and said, "If you can tolerate the smell and don't mind cleaning, this spot is yours, starting today." I nodded without hesitation. Every afternoon after school, I took a bus, a journey of nearly 40 minutes, to the shop. The work was far from glamorous, involving dusting, organizing, labeling, and occasionally assisting Grandma with sales. But I gradually developed an affection for the old items brimming with history. Each pocket watch or black and white photograph held a story, a stark contrast to the silence that had become commonplace in my own home. On chilly days, Grandma would bring me grilled cheese sandwiches and hot chocolate, often saying, "You may not be the center of someone else's world, but remember, you are the entire sky in your own." I committed every word to memory. 3 years passed. While Jason enjoyed the luxury of a new car, rent-free living, and weekly allowances from our parents, I continued to ride the bus home each night, my sleeves carrying the scent of old wood and book dust. I didn't harbor jealousy toward him. I simply kept myself occupied. I diligently saved every penny earned at the shop, kept every receipt, and enrolled in the state university. It wasn't as prestigious as Emerson, but it was affordable and offered a strong business program. I chose the practical route, not the extravagant one. Upon receiving my acceptance letter, I printed the PDF and taped it to my bedroom door. No one inquired and no one congratulated me. At the time, Jason was in his final year of college and had recently secured an internship offer in Boston. My mom was ecstatic, as if he had won a fortune. I sat at the dinner table quietly picking at my green beans, feeling invisible. I thought to myself, even if I were accepted into Harvard, she would likely just nod and move on. I opted to study locally and remained at home to save on rent. This meant waking up at 5:30 a.m. every morning to catch the first bus and working evening shifts at a nearby cafe after classes. I didn't have the luxury of complaining. Instead, I developed a detailed budget plan, took free online courses, and gradually accumulated a small fund that I referred to as my freedom account. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the conviction that one day I would be strong enough to leave this place behind. I never once requested financial assistance from my parents for my education. I even contributed monthly toward the utility bills. Despite this, they would often remark, "Emma, you're so responsible, unlike Jason. He calls me every time he needs something." I would smile, but something within me grew colder. Jason remained their pride and joy. He graduated with a lavish celebration, complete with cake, fresh flowers, guests, and even a professional photographer to capture every moment. When I completed my freshman year with a perfect GPA, my parents sent me a simple text message, "Well done." I grew accustomed to it. Instead of seeking attention, I channeled all my energy into work and school. I understood that patience and independence were my means of escaping a cycle of favoritism that I never chose. What I didn't anticipate was that someday, the very money I had saved through hard work and sacrifice would become a target, not by strangers, but by the very people to whom I was related. And when that day arrived, it would be more than just a lesson about kindness. It would be a harsh awakening about the ultimate limits of endurance. Jason graduated the spring I turned 21. I still remember that day. I was restocking pastries at the campus cafe when my mom called, her voice brimming with excitement. "Emma, Jason just proposed to his girlfriend and she said yes." I wiped my hands on my apron, attempting to sound impartial. "Really? That's wonderful. Please congratulate him for me." I didn't need to inquire about her identity. Since his sophomore year, Mom had been constantly talking about Emily, the blonde girl in his business program in Boston. Every time she mentioned her, she referred to her as the kind of girl worthy of Jason, as if only one type of person in the entire world was suitable for our family. Shortly after, the official announcement was posted on our family group chat and on my mom's Facebook page. Jason and Emily were getting married in September at a luxury resort in Vermont. An entire photo album of the proposal was attached. It featured a sunset, a banner flown by a small airplane across the sky, and a diamond ring nearly the size of a fingertip. I skimmed through it, then returned to my unfinished finance assignment. But that was only the beginning. 2 weeks later, during dinner, my parents informed me that they had decided to take out another loan to finance a lavish wedding for Jason. "This is the most important day of our son's life," my mom said, her eyes gleaming. "He deserves the best. The resort, a live band, a 5-course meal, even fireworks." I gently placed my spoon down and asked quietly, "What about the mortgage that's still unpaid?" My dad avoided eye contact while my mom gave a soft laugh. "Don't worry. Your father and I have it all under control, as long as Jason and Emily are happy." I remained silent. I knew that regardless of what I said, I would always be an outsider when it came to these decisions. So, from June to September, our house transformed into wedding headquarters for an event that cost nearly $48,000. My mom took a leave of absence from work to fully dedicate herself to the wedding. Meanwhile, I continued to work morning shifts at the cafe, attend school in the afternoon, and help clean up in the evenings because the house was overflowing with wedding gifts, fabrics, and invitations. One day, my mom handed me a large cardboard box and said, "Here's your bridesmaid dress. Try it on and see if it fits." Inside was a pastel pink satin gown and, tucked into a side pocket, a receipt for almost $350. I looked up and asked gently, Am I paying for this myself? She looked at me as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. You're an adult now, Emma. It's your responsibility. I've already had to juggle enough just to afford the live band. I nodded and said nothing further. That night, I sat in front of my laptop and quietly made the payment on my credit card. It was my biggest expense that month and the first time I had ever cried over a dress. The wedding unfolded exactly as they had envisioned. Extravagant, sparkling, filled with laughter and glittering lights. I wore the expensive bridesmaid dress, stood beside the happy couple, smiled under the chandeliers, and played my part perfectly. No one knew that the night before the wedding, I had to walk nearly 2 miles from the bus stop home because I had missed the last ride. No one asked how many hours I had slept that week while helping set up. They were too preoccupied with celebrating Jason's happiness. After the reception, when all the guests had departed, I stood at the sink helping Grandma wash glasses. She looked at me and said softly, "I'm proud of you, Emma. Not for standing on stage, but for standing strong when no one was behind you." I smiled, a genuine smile, a rare occurrence that day. I believed everything would return to normal afterward, but I was mistaken. A year later, Jason and Emily abruptly announced their move to Connecticut to manage a new branch of Emily's family business. My parents bid them farewell with tears, prolonged hugs, and a starter support fund of nearly $12,000, drawn from a second mortgage they had never mentioned to me. I stood at the door, watching them leave, and a strange coldness settled in my chest. Not from jealousy, but from a gut feeling that from then on, the burden would no longer fall on Jason. It would fall on me. After Jason and Emily's wedding, the apartment my parents had rented for him near Emerson remained vacant. I was familiar with that apartment. 2 bedrooms, a small living room, an open kitchen, and a bright balcony. It was just under a 15-minute walk from the campus where I studied. At the time, I was in my final year of college, juggling full-time classes and 2 part-time jobs just to stay afloat. Every morning felt like a race against the clock, and the city buses were almost always late. I was beginning to feel burned out. On a Sunday night, after a long evening shift at the cafe, I cautiously brought up the apartment with my parents. "I know Jason's apartment is sitting empty now. If it's possible, I'd like to move in. It would make studying and working much easier." My mom looked up from her phone, glanced at my dad, then replied flatly, "If you want to live there, you'll need to pay rent." "But Jason didn't pay," I blurted out. The atmosphere in the room grew tense. My dad folded his newspaper and said in an even tone, "The financial situation is different now, Emma. We just took on another loan to cover Jason's wedding. We can't afford to support you both." I pressed my lips together, suppressing my frustration. They weren't wrong. They had the right to set terms for their property, but the double standard was undeniable. Ultimately, I agreed to pay half the market rate as my mom proposed, covering all living expenses and utilities myself. That weekend, I moved in. The living room walls still bore tape marks from Jason's old posters. Burn marks on the carpet from his last birthday party hadn't been cleaned. I didn't complain. At the very least, this was the first space in my life I could finally call home. The following month, I graduated from college with honors. While my friends threw celebration parties, my parents sent me a pre-printed card that read, "Proud of you." No cake, no flowers, no family dinner. I let it go because something better had come along. I was offered a job at Westmore and Lanning, a well-known financial firm downtown, with a starting salary far exceeding my expectations. I shared the news with my parents over the weekend. My mom listened, then said flatly, "Good. So, starting next month, you'll pay full rent." I froze. "But we agreed I'd only pay half until I was stable." "Well, you're stable now," she cut in without hesitation. "A big company like that, good salary too. There's no reason you shouldn't pay in full." I didn't argue. I'd learned that every conversation like this had the same outcome. I would always have to give in. From that point forward, I transferred the full amount on time, every month, without fail. I continued to work diligently, waking up at 6 a.m., leaving the office at 7 p.m., returning to that worn-down apartment in silence, eating a quick dinner, and then immersing myself in more project work. I curtailed my calls home. Every call revolved around either rent or Jason and Emily updates, how they had just moved into a new house in Connecticut under Emily's family name, that they were expecting a baby, and that Jason had been mentioned in a local business article. Whenever Mom shared these updates, I remained quiet. I had learned to listen without feeling wounded, a skill no one had taught me, one I had to cultivate on my own. One late evening, I received an email from HR informing me that I was being considered for a promotion to assistant project manager. I had only been working there for 7 months, and I was already on the internal advancement list. Overjoyed, I simply sat on the couch for hours in disbelief. I didn't call my parents. I didn't want my success to become another pretext for raising the rent. A few days later, I opened the door to find my mom standing there with an envelope in hand. "Just stopping by to check on you," she said, placing the envelope on the table. I opened it to find a notice of rent adjustment, a 15% increase starting next month. I looked at her, trying to maintain my composure. "What's the reason this time?" "Rising costs, and now that you've got a new position, right?" she said casually. I nodded, then walked directly into my room and closed the door. In that moment, I realized one thing. This apartment had never truly been mine, and if I stayed, I would forever be seen as nothing more than a walking wallet in their eyes. But I didn't leave immediately because I had a plan, and I wanted them to be the first to face the consequences when it was executed. I had just finished an important meeting when my phone buzzed. It was my mom calling. "Emma, we need to talk. It's about Jason." I sat in the car, still holding my cup of hot coffee. Her voice had softened, indicating that something was amiss. "The company in Connecticut went bankrupt. Emily's family is furious. They say Jason tampered with the records and overspent the budget without reporting it. It turned into a major conflict. Now they want the house, the car, and even custody of the baby if there's a divorce." I closed my eyes. My gut instinct once again proved chillingly accurate. Mom continued, her voice more rushed now. "Jason, Emily, and baby Parker need a place to stay for now. You know the apartment you're renting is the biggest one, and it has 2 bedrooms." I opened my eyes and sat upright. "You're planning to move them in with me?" The silence on the other end stretched out. Then Mom said something that almost made me drop my coffee. "They'll stay rent-free for a while, but you'll keep paying the full rent as usual." I let out a bitter laugh, though she couldn't hear it. "I've been paying full rent on this apartment for 2 years. Now you want Jason's whole family to live here, and I'm just supposed to keep funding it? It's only for a few months. I know you'll understand," she said. I hung up without another word, but inside, my answer was crystal clear. This wasn't a request, it was an order, and I knew I no longer had a choice. 3 days later, Jason and his family arrived with a car full of luggage, baby toys, a crib, a rocker, and even a fancy espresso machine that cost more than anything I had ever possessed. Emily didn't utter a word upon entering, merely glanced around as if assessing the quality of her temporary accommodations. My mom accompanied them, walked around the apartment, then pointed to my bedroom. "This room is quiet enough for Parker. Emma, you can sleep on the sofa for now." "Sir," I stood still, the one who was paying rent. "This is my room. Your kid isn't a newborn. You don't need that much space." "Babies need a stable environment, don't you understand?" she retorted. I wanted to say that I had once been a child too, one who had needed her own quiet corner to dream and rest, but never got it. Instead, I remained silent, packed my personal belongings neatly, and moved to the sofa by the window. The next 3 months were a waking nightmare. I became the unpaid maid, the reluctant cook, and the sole financial provider for the entire apartment. Jason didn't work. He lounged in the living room all day, scrolling through his phone, watching old videos from his successful days, and sighing dramatically. Emily didn't work either. She ran errands or shopped while leaving Parker with me, immediately after my long shifts. No one inquired if I was tired. No one cared if I needed peace. The meals I cooked vanished within 15 minutes. Dishes piled up, and baby clothes were draped across the balcony. The utility bills doubled. When I finally suggested that they contribute, my mom called me that same evening, her voice sharp. "Emma, stop being selfish. Your brother's going through a tough time. He used to have it all. Now he's lost everything. Can't you carry a little for your family?" I laughed quietly. "I've been carrying since I was 16, Mom." That night, I sat at the kitchen table, now covered in baby stickers, reviewing my bank statements. The numbers didn't lie. At this rate, I wouldn't be able to afford rent much longer. Then, one night, I overheard a conversation between Jason and my mom in the living room. They didn't know I was home. "Don't worry," Mom said. "I'll take half of Emma's rent each month and give it to you. Think of it as remote support." "That's perfect," Jason replied, sounding relieved. "At least someone in this house gets it." I stood frozen, chills running down my spine. They weren't just taking up space, they were using me as a bottomless wallet. The next evening, after everyone had gone to bed, I opened my laptop and revisited the folder I had named Freedom, where I had saved apartment listings. I knew this wouldn't be easy, but I had lived my whole life in silence. It was time to break it. After my brother and Emily moved into my place temporarily, I thought nothing could surprise me anymore. But I was wrong. On a Monday morning, while I was rushing through a dry piece of toast before my online meeting, my mom suddenly showed up at my apartment door holding a stack of papers. "Emma, we need to talk." "About the rent?" I looked up, quickly swallowing my bite. "I paid it on time this month." She placed the papers on the table, calmly pulling out a printed notice. "Starting next month, the rent will double." The room fell silent. I set my coffee down and looked her straight in the eyes. "Double? Are you serious?" "You can see for yourself," she began. "There are more people living here now, more water, more electricity, more wear on the appliances. You have a steady job, Emma. You should be helping the family more." I leaned back in my chair, trying to maintain my composure. "And Jason? He still isn't paying a cent. He's going through a crisis." "He lost everything. But you? You have everything right now. Don't be petty." I gave a dry laugh. The everything she mentioned? An apartment I paid for, sleeping on a sofa, cooking meals I rarely got to eat, working non-stop, all while being treated like a money dispenser. That night, I reviewed my bank statements and budget again. If the rent really doubled, almost my entire income would go just to keeping this place, where I didn't even have my own space. Something didn't add up. My gut told me there was something darker behind this. In one rare moment, my mom left her phone on the kitchen counter. A notification from Jason popped up. "Mom, can you send $400 this week? Emily wants that high chair for Parker, the one she saw at Target. It's really nice." Then another message followed. "Oh, and if Emma asks, just say it's for plumbing repairs, okay?" My chest tightened. I opened the phone. No password needed. Mom never thought I'd snoop. A long thread of texts appeared. For the past 3 months, every time I'd transferred my rent, my mom had been secretly giving half of it to Jason and Emily, calling it emotional support to help them through a tough time. I stood frozen. It wasn't the money, it was the betrayal, done in secret, with no warning and no thank you. That night, once everyone had gone to sleep, I sat alone on the balcony, wrapped in a thin blanket. I stared at the glowing windows of distant buildings and wondered if one of them belonged to someone like me, someone who once believed hard work would be enough. I was wrong. I went back to the living room, which also served as my bedroom, opened my laptop, and typed in search terms. 1-bedroom apartment near downtown. No roommate lease. Private space only. After an hour of searching, I found it. A quiet, modest building 10 minutes from my office. The landlord was a kind, middle-aged woman who only required a stable income and someone who respected the space. I sent an email requesting a showing for the very next morning. The next day was Friday. While preparing materials for a presentation, my mom called again, this time with an unusually sweet tone. "Emma, I just talked to Jason. Could you transfer the rent today? I'm planning to split it up and send half to the kids for groceries this weekend." I paused for a few seconds, then replied, "Of course, Mom, but this will be the last time." She hesitated. "What do you mean?" "You mean what?" I didn't respond. I just smiled, gently, like someone folding the final letter before sending it off. It just needed 30 more hours. 30 hours to finish everything I had been quietly preparing for over a week. I had already signed the lease for a new apartment, a small, tidy one-bedroom on the third floor of a quiet building, exactly an 8-minute walk from my office. The landlord was a kind, elderly widow whose only request was, "No noise, no drama." I'd promised her I'd had more than enough drama in my life, mostly from people who shared my blood. I purchased the largest suitcase I could find on Amazon with same-day delivery. After work, I began quietly packing my belongings in the apartment I once called home, now nothing more than a place where I deposited my paycheck without dignity. I didn't touch anything that wasn't mine. I left the chairs, the table, the espresso machine Jason never used. I packed only my clothes, laptop, a few books, one bedside lamp, and the only things that were truly mine: silence, patience, and a will that could no longer be broken. That night, Jason was glued to his old vlogs on YouTube, and Emily was rolling her hair in what used to be my bedroom, now called Parker's quiet nap room. I taped a small note to the fridge: "Don't look, don't call, and don't expect another dime." Then, at 2:10 a.m., I quietly wheeled my 2 suitcases down the hallway where I had lived for 3 years, both as a tenant and as a puppet. I had never seen the city sky feel so peaceful. No shouting, no baby cries, just one Emma, dragging her luggage down the sidewalk, walking toward freedom. My new apartment wasn't big, but no one there demanded rent just to hand it over to someone else. No one called me selfish for not wanting to support grown adults. No eyes looked at me like I was an ATM with legs. The next morning, I sat on the empty floor, coffee in hand, and played soft piano music. As the notes echoed around the space, I knew I had just made the most important move of my life. A week passed, no calls, no messages. I exhaled. Then came the first of the month, the day I usually sent the rent. My phone rang. It was Mom. I didn't pick up. 3 hours later, a message came through. "Emma, just a gentle reminder. Today's rent is due. Jason's planning to take Parker for a checkup, and I haven't been able to send them extra this week." I smiled, just as I expected. I typed each word slowly, deliberately. "Mom, maybe you haven't realized. I moved out last week. You won't be receiving another cent. Not today, not next month, not ever." Less than 5 minutes later, the phone rang non-stop. I let it ring in silence. When I didn't answer, she sent a long message, half angry, half pleading. "Emma, you're being unreasonable. You know your brother is going through a hard time. I only took part of your rent to help him get back on his feet." That's what family does. We share. How could you just walk away like this? I replied with a single line. Family isn't where one person carries everything and the others only take. Less than a minute later, a new message came, this time from Jason. "So you really bailed, huh? Congrats. Hope your new bed is big enough to hold all your selfishness." I read it and felt nothing, no anger, no resentment, just a strange, quiet relief because I was no longer trapped in a version of family built on duty and exploitation. I blocked their numbers after that, every call, every message, every thread. That winter, the snow came earlier than usual. My little apartment was warmed by an old gas heater, but it still felt cozier than anywhere I'd ever lived. Because there was no invisible coldness emanating from the people who were supposed to cherish me. I had just completed the first semester of my MBA with a perfect GPA. I'd embarked on the program simply to test my capabilities, but the more I studied, the more I felt like I had entered a new realm, one where my worth was determined by knowledge, effort, and resilience, not by my last name or position within the family. At work, I was selected to lead a collaborative project with the Chicago office. During a brief business trip, I met Logan, the head of strategy there, 8 years my senior, and an alumnus of the same MBA program I was attending. Our connection didn't unfold like some cinematic romance. No immediate spark, no late-night intimate conversations. It began with mutual respect, followed by brief lunches, shared book recommendations, and eventually a sense of peace I had never experienced with a man. Logan never inquired about my family, but when I shared my story, briefly and honestly, he simply nodded. Some people have to leave in order to truly live. I had grown accustomed to being strong independently, but with someone beside me who didn't seek to control or exploit me, I realized strength doesn't necessitate solitude. We weren't in a hurry. Both of us carried our own past wounds, which made us even more cautious and clear in our intentions. Logan didn't appear as some reward after years of suffering. He was a subtle affirmation that I had been heading in the right direction and that there are still individuals in the world who value boundaries. Meanwhile, through my grandma, I learned that things were unraveling back home. Jason and Emily had maxed out their credit cards and couldn't afford Parker's preschool tuition. My mom had started borrowing from friends to maintain appearances. The same individuals who once idolized Jason were now avoiding her calls. Grandma recounted that my mom cried in the kitchen one day, repeating, "If only we hadn't let Emma go." But the truth was, they never possessed the power to release me. I walked away on my own, and they simply couldn't prevent me any longer. I didn't harbor hatred towards them. Hate requires energy to sustain, and I had redirected all of mine towards my career, my education, and myself. I began transforming my experiences into essays, not to complain, but to give voice to others like me. I shared one on a forum for financially independent women, and it unexpectedly went viral. A week later, I was invited to speak at a nonprofit organization for women's education. They asked me to join their series called Standing Up After the Shadows, not as a victim, but as a survivor who had redefined her own future. The first time I stood on stage and saw people quietly wiping away tears, I realized I wasn't just sharing my story anymore. I was speaking for hundreds who hadn't yet discovered their own strength. That night, I returned home, opened my laptop, and accessed the folder titled Family. Thaw. I didn't delete the old photos. I simply moved them to an external drive and renamed the folder Lesson Learned. No bitterness, no nostalgia, just the understanding that I didn't need to carry everything forward to move on. That weekend, Logan suggested we visit his mom in Vermont. I hesitated, but he gently took my hand and said, "Don't expect anything. I just want you to know that family can also be where you're loved the right way." I nodded, not because I needed to be healed, but because I was ready, not for the past, but for the future. It had once been a shadow in my own home. But now I stood in the light, not because anyone guided me there, but because I had discovered it myself. Emma's story serves as a powerful reminder that freedom doesn't always stem from escaping others. It begins the moment we dare to establish clear boundaries for ourselves. No one is destined to be a wallet for the irresponsible, and family should never be employed as an excuse for injustice. In reality, strength isn't always about enduring. Sometimes it's about walking away, standing tall, and constructing a life that belongs to you. Emma accomplished it, and so can you. What are your thoughts on Emma's decision? Was she excessively harsh, or was it the sole means of saving herself? Share your opinions in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more compelling family narratives in the future.